He had everything money could buy. But in a sterile hospital room on the 42nd floor of one of the city's most prestigious medical centers, none of it mattered. Marcus Wellington lay unconscious, his leg blackening by the hour. The infection was spreading faster than any of the specialists could stop it, and in exactly 12 hours, the surgical team was going to amputate. But what nobody knew was that a young nurse was about to break every rule, risk her entire career, and do something that would either save his life or destroy it completely. If you're new here, please subscribe, because this story is about to take a turn nobody saw coming. The city never really sleeps. Even at 2 in the morning, you can feel it breathing outside the hospital windows. The lights of downtown stretch out like an ocean of possibility. But inside room 4207, there was only one thing left: time running out. Marcus Wellington's father, Gregory, stood by the window, staring at nothing. His suit was still crisp, his tie still perfect, but his reflection in the glass told a different story. This was a man who'd spent 40 years building an empire, and in all that time, he'd never learned that some things can't be conquered with a check 3 months ago. Marcus had been unstoppable. Captain of his university rowing team, straight A's, the kind of kid that makes other parents jealous at dinner parties. A single rowing accident during practice changed everything. A fall, a crack, what should have been a simple fracture. The doctors said 6 weeks, maybe 8, then everything went wrong. The fracture got infected. Not just infected, the kind of infection that laughs at antibiotics. Gregory had brought in specialists from out-of-state top surgeons, infectious disease experts who'd treated presidents. Nothing worked. The infection came back stronger each time, like it was mocking their efforts, like it knew something they didn't. By week 8, the fever wouldn't break. By week 10, the wound had turned black at the edges. By week 12, the head surgeon, Dr. Morrison, stone-faced and clinical, finally said the words nobody wanted to hear. "We need to remove the leg, soon, before this spreads any further." Gregory remembered standing in that consultation room, the doctor's words hitting him like waves. Remove the leg. His son, the boy who'd rowed, who'd run, who'd danced at his sister's wedding just 4 months ago. He'd signed the consent forms with a hand that felt like it belonged to someone else. The surgery was scheduled for sunrise. Tonight was the last night his son would be whole. Gregory sat in the hard plastic chair beside the bed, watching the monitors, listening to the beep, beep, beep of the heart rate, steady but getting slower. Marcus's breathing was shallow, labored. His fever had spiked again, 104.7 degrees. The nurses had been in an hour ago, changing ice packs, checking vitals, their faces all the same mixture of sympathy and surrender they'd already given up too. The clock on the wall read 2:47 a.m. The city outside was at its quietest, that moment between midnight and dawn. When even the traffic sounds fade away, Gregory thought about calling someone. His ex-wife, their daughter. But what would he say? That tomorrow their son's life as he knew it would end? He pressed his forehead against the cold metal of the bed frame and tried to remember how to pray. The door opened quietly. Most people wouldn't have noticed, but Gregory had been sitting in this room for so long that he could hear a change in air pressure, could sense someone's presence before they came into view. He looked up. She was young, early 20s maybe, dressed in scrubs that had seen better days. Her name tag read Sophie Chen in slightly faded letters. But what caught Gregory's attention wasn't her appearance. It was the way she looked at Marcus, not like he was a patient chart or a case number, but like he was a person "Just checking on his vitals," she said softly, moving toward the monitors. "I'm Sophie, helping with night coverage." Gregory just nodded. He'd stopped making small talk days ago. Sophie moved with practiced efficiency, but there was something different about how she worked. She didn't rush. She looked at Marcus's leg carefully, peeling back the edge of the bandage just enough to check the wound without disturbing it. Gregory watched as her expression changed. She was looking for something specific. Her eyes narrowed. She pressed gently around the wound, listening. Actually listening, like the leg was telling her something. Then she did something unexpected. She pulled out a small notebook from her pocket and started writing. Not in the official chart. In her own notebook. Sketches, notes, observations. Gregory had no idea what she was writing, but he could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. After about 5 minutes, she carefully redressed the wound and stepped back. "How long has he been running this fever?" Sophie asked, still looking at the monitors. 3 days straight. 104, 105, nothing touches it. Gregory's voice was rough, unused. "The doctors say..." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Sophie nodded slowly. She was quiet for a long moment, reading through the chart at the foot of the bed. Her eyes moved down the page, absorbing information. Then her body went very still. Gregory saw it happen. The exact moment she saw something. "What is it?" he asked. Sophie hesitated. For a long moment she didn't answer. Then, "Can I ask you something? Has Marcus had any reaction to the antibiotics? Any rashes, stomach issues, anything unusual? Why? Just, has he?" Gregory thought back. "His stomach was upset last week. We thought it was the pain medication, so they switched it." Sophie closed the chart slowly. She looked at Marcus's sleeping face, then back at Gregory. Her jaw clenched, like she was working through something internally. "I need to check something," she said. "I'll be right back." She left, moving quickly but quietly. Gregory sat back in his chair, confused. He'd learned in the past 3 months not to hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope made it worse when things fell apart. But something in the way Sophie had moved, the way she'd looked at that wound, made something in his chest tighten. He told himself not to read into it. He told himself it was probably nothing, but his heart rate had gone up anyway. Sophie came back 20 minutes later. She locked the door behind her and pulled up a chair close to Gregory's. "I can't say this officially," she started, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I need you to understand that what I'm about to tell you, I could lose my job for this. Worse, I could make things worse for Marcus. But I think something's been happening that nobody noticed." Gregory leaned forward. "I was looking at his medication history," Sophie continued, "and I noticed something. Marcus has been receiving the same broad-spectrum antibiotic for 8 weeks, right? Well, about week 4, he developed a rash. Just a mild one, but it was documented. The team thought it would pass, so they kept him on it." "What does that mean?" "It means," Sophie said carefully, "that his body might not be reacting to the infection. It might be reacting to the cure. If his system is sensitive to this particular antibiotic, being exposed to it constantly could actually be triggering more inflammation, more swelling. It might look like the infection is getting worse, but it might actually be his immune system fighting the medicine itself." Gregory stared at her. "So you're saying..." "I'm saying the infection might not be as resistant as everyone thinks. And I'm saying that if we changed the approach, if we used a different method of treatment, we might see a very different outcome than amputation." "Have you told the doctors this?" Sophie's laugh was short, bitter. "Who am I going to tell? I'm a second-year nurse covering the night shift." I'm not even supposed to be analyzing medication combinations. The attending physician has already decided. The surgical team has already prepared. Dr. Morrison doesn't listen to residents, let alone people like me. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. I learned something in nursing school that stuck with me, she said quietly. This old rural medicine technique, it's not standard protocol anymore, but it was used for centuries before modern antibiotics. It's a specific combination of gentle cleaning, pressure therapy, and natural antiseptics. It was designed to fight infection without hurting the tissue. She paused. I've read about it working in cases where standard treatment failed. Gregory understood what she was really saying. What are you thinking? Sophie turned to face him. Her eyes were fierce. I'm thinking that if we do nothing, Marcus loses his leg. I'm thinking that tomorrow at sunrise he goes into surgery for an amputation that might have been unnecessary. But I'm also thinking that if I'm wrong about this, if I try this unconventional approach and it makes things worse. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. What do you need? Gregory asked. Sophie looked surprised. You'd let me try? My son loses his leg in 12 hours if we don't do something different. What do I have to lose? Sophie exhaled slowly. I'd need to work on him tonight. I'd need to stay after my shift. I'd need to monitor him closely, watch for any signs that things are getting worse, and I'd need you to keep this between us. If anyone finds out that I'm trying an unapproved treatment method, this hospital will have my license before breakfast. Gregory stood up. How can I help? Sophie smiled for the first time. It was a small smile, but it changed her entire face. Just let me work, and pray this actually works. The clock read 3:15 a.m. when Sophie really started. She'd changed into fresh scrubs, pulled her hair back tight, and arranged everything she needed on the small surgical tray. Gregory watched from the chair, completely out of his element. This was no longer boardrooms and contracts. This was life and death, and he had absolutely no control over the outcomes. Sophie worked methodically. She cleaned the wound with meticulous care, using saline and gentle pressure. Then, she applied something from a small bottle, something she'd brought from somewhere, something that definitely wasn't part of the standard protocol. As she worked, she spoke to Marcus, even though he was unconscious. You're going to be okay, she whispered. I know nobody else believes it, but you are. You're not done yet. Your story isn't supposed to end in an operating room tomorrow. Gregory watched as hours dissolved. 3:15 became 4:30. 4:30 became 5:45. Sophie never stopped. She'd adjust Marcus's position, check the monitors, apply new dressing, clean and re-clean the wound. Her movements became automatic. Almost ritualistic beads of sweat ran down her face. Her scrubs were damp, but her hands never shook. At one point, around 4 a.m., Gregory asked, "Should you sit down? Rest?" Sophie shook her head without looking up. "Can't. If something changes, I need to see it immediately. What happens if the infection gets worse? Then I stop, and I tell the doctors exactly what I did. And Marcus still goes into surgery, just with a nurse who will probably be looking for a new job." She paused, checking the monitors. But that's not what's going to happen. There was such absolute certainty in her voice that Gregory almost believed her. Around 5:30 a.m., Sophie suddenly went very still. She was staring at the monitors. Gregory's heart jumped into his throat. What? What is it?" "Shh," Sophie held up a hand. She was reading the heart rate monitor, watching the rhythm. Then a small smile appeared on her face. "His heart rate is stabilizing, and look," she pointed to the fever monitor, 104.1. It had been 104.7 when she started. That could be nothing, Sophie said, but her voice had hope in it now. Could be coincidence, but we're going the right direction. Gregory felt something in his chest crack open. Not hope yet, not quite, but something close to it. By 6 a.m., Sophie had done everything she could. She sat back, exhausted, and looked at Marcus's leg. The swelling was marginally down. The angry red color had softened slightly. The blackness at the edges was no longer spreading. In fact, it looked a tiny bit lighter. "That's good," Sophie whispered. "Come on, Marcus, you can do this." At 6:15, the sky started to brighten outside the window. The city was waking up. In exactly 45 minutes, Dr. Morrison would arrive with the surgical team. They would come in, expecting to prepare Marcus for amputation. Sophie stood up on shaky legs. She looked at Marcus's leg one more time, then at the monitors. His heart rate had stabilized. His fever was 103.9, and holding his breathing was more even. She'd done everything she could. Now it was up to Marcus. The door burst open at 6:58 a.m. Dr. Morrison entered with his surgical team. 2 residents, a nurse, and an anesthesiologist. They were dressed in scrubs, ready to prep the patient for the 7:30 surgery. Their faces were professionally blank. They'd done this before. Then they all stopped. Dr. Morrison walked straight to the bed and looked at Marcus's leg. His jaw clenched. He peeled back the bandage, roughly, without Sophie's careful precision, and stared. "What happened here?" His voice was quiet, dangerous. Sophie stepped forward. She was terrified. Gregory could see it in the way her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "I did some additional treatment overnight, doctor. I noticed something in the medication history and wanted to—" "You did what?" Dr. Morrison's eyes flashed. "You administered treatment? On your own authority? Without consulting me?" "The patient was going to lose his leg," Sophie said quietly. "I thought—" "You're not paid to think," Dr. Morrison snapped. He turned to his team. "Get the infectious disease specialist down here. I want cultures run immediately. And get this bandage documented exactly as it is right now." He looked back at Sophie, and his expression was cold. "What exactly did you put on this wound?" Sophie told him. Every ingredient, every step. She didn't try to hide anything or minimize what she'd done. She laid it all out, knowing with every word that she was probably destroying her career. The room filled with tense silence. Gregory stepped forward. "She was trying to save my son's life," he said. His voice had the same tone he used in boardrooms, the tone that made people listen. "The infection wasn't responding to your treatment. She had a theory. She acted on it. And if you look at those monitors, you'll see that his fever is lower than it's been in 3 days." Dr. Morrison looked at Gregory for a long moment. Then he turned back to Marcus's leg. "Get me the thermal imaging," he commanded. It took 12 minutes for them to bring the equipment. When they got the thermal scan of Marcus's leg, the entire room went silent. The infection was still there, yes, but the spreading had stopped. Not just stopped, it had reversed slightly. The heat signature that had been growing larger for days was now actually getting smaller. Dr. Morrison stared at the image for a long time. "I want her under observation," he said finally, pointing to Sophie. "If there's any deterioration, any at all, we're going straight to surgery, but—" He paused, looking at the numbers again. "We'll delay the operation. 24 hours. We'll monitor his vitals, run new cultures, see what's happening here." He turned and left the room without another word. His team scrambled to follow him, already talking into pages and phones. When the door closed, Sophie sat down hard in the nearest chair. Her entire body was shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Gregory walked over and put a hand on her shoulder. "Thank you," he said. It didn't feel like enough words for what she'd done, but it was all he had. Sophie looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "He's not out of the woods yet," she said. "Don't get your hopes up too much, but he's fighting, and that matters." Over the next 3 days, something remarkable happened. Marcus's fever broke completely. The infection started to actually retreat. The wound, instead of spreading, began to heal. The cultures came back showing something extraordinary. What Sophie had suspected was right. Marcus's body wasn't fighting the infection as much as it was fighting the antibiotic. Once that was removed, his own immune system suddenly knew what to do. The story spread through the hospital like wildfire. The nurse who'd broken protocol and saved a patient's life. The millionaire's son, who almost lost his leg to a doctor's assumption. By day 5, medical journals were calling to interview Dr. Morrison about the case. By day 7, Sophie's technique was being discussed in hospitals across the city. But the real transformation came on day 14, when Marcus opened his eyes and really looked at the world again. Gregory was there, of course. He'd barely left the room. But it was Sophie he asked for first. "She here?" Marcus's voice was hoarse, unused. "I'll get her," Gregory said, and he went to find her immediately. Sophie walked in carefully, like she wasn't sure she was supposed to be there. She'd been offered a position as a specialist in infectious disease protocols, an incredible opportunity. But she was still working the night shift too, at least for now. She couldn't just walk away from patient care. When Marcus saw her, something soft happened in his face. "Did you?" He didn't finish, but he didn't need to. "You did," Sophie said, pulling up a chair. "I just reminded you that you were still alive." Marcus looked down at his leg. The scar was still there, red and healing. But it was there. It was attached. He had both legs. He still had his whole life ahead of him. "I heard what you did," Marcus said quietly. "I heard my dad talking about it. You risked everything." Sophie shrugged uncomfortably. "I did what I thought was right." "Most people don't do that," Marcus said. His eyes were focused on her now, really seeing her. "Most people follow the rules and protect themselves. You didn't. You chose to care about a stranger more than you cared about your own career. I don't think I'll ever stop thinking about that." Sophie looked away. Her cheeks flushed. "You would have done the same thing." "No," Marcus said gently. "I wouldn't have. But now, I'm going to try to be the kind of person who would." Gregory watched this exchange, and something shifted inside him. For the first time since this nightmare had started, he felt something that wasn't fear or desperation. He felt hope. Real, solid, grounded hope. 6 months later, Marcus walked into his university without crutches. He moved carefully. He would probably always have a slight limp, a reminder of how close he'd come. But he moved, he was alive, he was whole. The Wellington Foundation for Medical Innovation was announced 3 months after that. Funded by Gregory Wellington and focused on exactly one thing: finding and supporting young medical professionals who challenged conventional wisdom, who broke protocol when they thought they could save a life, who chose compassion over caution. The first scholarship went to Sophie Chen. But more importantly, the foundation began funding research into exactly the kind of unconventional treatments that had saved Marcus's life. Treatments that were waiting to be discovered because conventional medicine had stopped looking for them. Sophie didn't need the money. By then, she'd been written up in medical journals. She'd been offered positions at every major hospital in the city, but she took the scholarship anyway, and she used it to go back to school to study infectious disease, to understand better how the human body fights back. To become the person who helped save Marcus's life was just the beginning of what she could do. Years later, long after Marcus had fully recovered and moved forward with his life, long after Sophie had become a leading expert in unconventional infectious disease treatment, they'd sometimes run into each other at hospital events or medical conferences, and Sophie would always say the same thing. "You know, I was just doing my job." And Marcus would always respond, "No, you were doing something much bigger than your job. You were showing the world what real courage looks like." Because here's the truth that nobody talks about. Miracles don't usually come from luck or fate or divine intervention. They come from one person looking at an impossible situation and deciding to try anyway. Deciding to care more about whether someone lives than about whether they follow the rules. If you were in Sophie's position, surrounded by authority figures telling you it couldn't be done, surrounded by protocols designed to protect you, would you have risked it all? Would you have looked at a stranger's impossible situation and decided to fight? That's the question this story leaves us with. Because every single day, there are Sophies in hospitals and offices and homes everywhere making decisions about whether to follow the safe path or the right path. And the world changes based on which one they choose. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please subscribe. Please share it. Because stories like this deserve to be heard.